I try to challenge myself to be thankful for things verbally and write them down, maybe in a journal, somewhere, so I can make sure that I am, giving God thanks for everything He's done. It's easy to get caught up and be busy, and I'm kind of scatterbrained, so I really liked the part of, taking time to focus on telling Him thank you about the things He's done. A thankful pumpkin. Oh. So is it an actual pumpkin that you write on? Interesting. Okay, so there she's talking about, for you online folks, having a little pumpkin they write every day on it. Try to do every day or often through the season of thanking God for things. Years ago, we used to have when my kids were little, we had a pretty large homeschooling group here, and it was really neat. And we weren't an organized group per se. We weren't an organization, I should say. We actually were quite organized. And um, one year, Krista Byrne she was in charge of the crafts, and she made this awesome activity. And it was called Thankful Trees. And so she had cut out the trunk and the branches because we had a lot of little ones. Like mine were 3 and 4 and 5, 6 and stuff like that. And so they would paste the trunk, and then adults were supposed to help them write things that they're thankful for on their leaves, and then glue the leaves on the tree. And it was so darling. Except I had one of those children that refused to complete it. He thought he had graced me enough with his cooperation by just putting the trunk on the paper. So leaves, and here's Gideon, bare as anything, no leaves on his. And he's like, I was like, don't you want to write something? No, it's good. So this was a little bit during his difficult times when we didn't know gluten was creating monsters in him and stuff, and we literally did not know. I mean, we thought, does he have ADHD? Does he have, we really did not know what was going on. We just knew, and of course Jeff was deployed. We just knew something's not right with our kid. I decided not to test him for ADD because I was convinced he was quite organized and methodical in his evil. It was not impulsive at all. So good times, good times. But anyway, that always laughs. I was thinking about that the other day. I wanted to find that craft if I could, or a picture of it to show. I don't want to show him, but whatever. He's pretty secure in himself. Okay, so we are finally in chapter 4. I promise you, we made it. Of Colossians, it is. Now, when we do the book of Ruth, I haven't looked at a calendar just yet, but we will start the book of Ruth December 1st. I think it's the first. It's a Wednesday. It's the first Wednesday of December. And I'm going to look at the calendar, and I'm going to allot a X amount of Wednesdays for it. And we're going to be finished with Ruth by that time, no matter what. Okay, so what? So Ruth, I'm going to do in a more organized manner than I've been doing on these, and then hopefully no one gets sick and nothing has to be rescheduled. And then be thinking about after Ruth, where do you think you might want to go? So yeah, that farther down the road, but I really am trying to get more organized in the things. Ruth, I plan to do some. We're going to talk about the Jewish culture, and there's some things that aren't blurted out in black and white in Ruth. They're inferred, and so I want us to go through those, because as far as reading it and understanding it, pretty much it's pretty easy to. It's not like the Book of Revelation or anything, so it's pretty easy. But there are some significant cultural connections and things we need to talk about. Okay, but back to Colossians 4. Now we talked about verses 1 and 2 and pretty much last week, but I'm going to continue. I'm going to pick up with verse 2 and I'm going to read forward to about 6. I'm going to read through to 6 and then we'll go back and talk about them. This was some humbling stuff for me because when I think of Paul, I think of, I'm sure you do too, this amazing spiritual giant, and he was, but some of the things he was talking about, I thought, okay, so he had to think about those things too. So verse 2, he's remember he's talking to the Colossians and he's wrapping things up. Continue in prayer. I gotta be more faithful in that. Yeah, I pray a lot, but I need to make sure I'm more faithful in it. I'll be honest with you. Okay. Continue in prayer and watching the same with thanksgiving, with all praying also for us, that God would open us a door of utterance to speak the mystery of Christ, for which I am also in bonds, that I may make it manifest as I ought to speak. Walk in wisdom toward them without redeeming the time. Your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that ye may know how ye ought to answer every man. Okay, so this is why it's like humbling slash encouraging to me. Because in here, Paul is saying, hey guys, pray, keep praying. Hey, and if you would you pray for me? Pray for me and pray for me that not that I'd be freed from prison. I have to admit, that's probably the first thing I'd be saying. Don't forget about me. I'm still, and from what everybody I have, any scholar I've read, they really, almost all of them say that not only was he in prison, he was actually chained to a Roman guard, chained to a guard at all times. Awkward. But he's saying, he's asking for them to pray that he'll be given more opportunities to speak about Christ. And I thought, wow, he's so not selfish. I think I would want to be selfish and say, get me out of this stinky, rat infested, disgusting, But he's saying, the very thing that put me in these chains anyway. That's what he's saying right there. The very thing that put me in these chains. I want to do it again. He's so focused on the gospel. But I think some of that, though, is like we talked about last week. He doesn't wallow in his. He's a new man in Christ. He's put on the new man. But he's not forgetful of, I used to be that. And I think I needed to sometimes do more. I don't want to wallow in my past. God has made me free from anything like that. But I do want to remember where I came from. I want to remember my chains so that I can be more thankful about my salvation status. Um, anyway, it just blew my mind. This chains, and the very reason why he got put in chains, he wants to have an opportunity to do again. I'm blown away about that. I started thinking about he's centered, and I thought he's soul centered. He's spirit centered, is what he is. That's amazing. I feel a story about that. I did the Voice of Martyrs magazine and Silas in Ethiopia, and he was from the prison sometimes, and he had to sleep by the toilet. And there's so many people in there, and he said, "I'm so thankful that God's coming to prison." And I'm just like, wow. The guy who started with the Martyrs the same way. He was in prison for 14 years. That's what we watched this morning. Yeah. That's what we're doing with our kids instead of doing a regular Bible. Every day we're watching missionaries. They have, the Warmbrandts have a wonderful story. I mean, I'm going to preach a little bit here. Don't give money directly to the Voice of Martyrs because they're guilty of misusing their money and being not cool. Okay? So, very sad because the family worked hard, but they've had some abuse in leadership in their organization and did not hold their people accountable and just said, too bad for you, you victims. So I don't have the Warmbrand son is still alive. You can reach through him and stuff like that. But their mission The original goal is awesome, and I love that I can think about. I get the little magazine, and it never fails. It comes on a day that I think my life is really hard, and then I read the magazine. I'm like, oh, what am I doing? What am I doing? Thinking I have any kind of hardship. I mean, we do have hardships, so don't belittle your hardships, but mine really are not anything big. And then I'm sitting there going, man, well, oh yeah, how are you? So the voice of the martyrs, guys. What I love about them though is we tend to think of martyr as past tense, like it's something from history. People will burn at the stake in history, but these are modern stories, y'all. These are today's people, and I'm saying most of this for people online. You guys already know. But if you do need it, Voice of the Martyrs has some good resources that some of them are free, some of them, they're pretty good resources to help you be focused during times of praying for the persecuted, which is something we should do. It's just amazing to me when I read stories of the may I be so Christ centered and spirit filled, like Perpetua in history, um, actually guided the sword to her neck, and because he kept missing. And if you read actual old historical accounts of the persecuted Christians who were like thrown to the lions and all that other stuff in the time, their guards will tell you there was a literal shining to them. They just saw a different presence about them. And Perpetua, um, she was just trying to go to class to get baptized to qualify for baptism, to go to class, show it was probably maybe 21 at the most. And so you're thinking, wow, So my prayer's always been, Lord, if I were Paul, like in Colossians 4, if I were this person, I really pray that I sent you chicken. And I'm going to be crying and stuff like that, Lord, because they saw the calm, the assurance. And they weren't blasé, like, I'm going to die today. They weren't blasé at all. They were just very assured of where I'm going. Yeah, you're going to kill me. But I'm going to be with my Savior. And I'm like, I want to be that, Lord. I don't want persecution, but if I were to be, I want to be so focused on testimony. I would be anything up. There's still some good. It's not just there's nuggets of wisdom and all this stuff. In verse 4, again, I humbled that I I don't want to talk to them right now about Christ because do I explain where I am right now? And that's pretty sad. That's a pretty sad reason to not be able to tell someone about Christ. I purposely chose not to. I wasn't doing drugs, I wasn't drinking, I wasn't out doing illegal activities, but I was at a party where that was going on. And my friend and I weren't being anything but just being silly and stuff like that. And one of them said, how do you always have such a fun time, no matter what you do? And how do you have, you're always so happy, and how are you always like this? Because they had to be happy. They had to, you know, it looks like we're having some connection issues, so we may not. This may not be available online later, just in case you hear anybody talk about it. Not that I think people talk about it, but you know what I'm saying. Okay, verse 5. Walk in wisdom toward them that are without, redeeming the time. So walk in wisdom toward the people who are without Christ. Okay. I think this also both ways. First of all, someone that's not saved, they're not going to understand all the vocabulary we talk. They're not going to understand all the backstory. And you know how the Bible talks about, you know, when someone's a new Christian, you don't even just throw them the hardcore doctrine. You give them the little stuff first, the milk, and you give them, you know, build them up to meat. So likewise, dump a bunch of um, vocabulary, but makes you look pious. And also, they don't need no only asking. And you know, we all know when someone's asking to just they're nosy, or we know when they're asking because they really want to know. You know, what we do in our church is not secretive, but there's no really reason to just out of blue start telling the unsaved person about how we do our communion service and blah blah blah, because they're gonna be like, I want to know this why. I mean, you know, it doesn't really apply to them. It's not applicable. But also, when it's about be wise with those who don't have Christ, because that's basically what it's saying. Be wise with your behavior too. Be wise on what you bring in from them or to you. Definitely. And redeeming, you don't know how much longer you have. You don't know how much longer we have if the rapture is coming. So you need to make all these opportunities count. And no, I'm not saying you have to go out and knock on doors. If the Lord leads you to do that, please do that safely. That's again, be wise. But simple things, guys. If when thing we have invitations printed out for our different events, like pretty soon they'll have the play, hand them out. Hand out tracks. Share people the link to the Done book that they can see in different languages. You could tell them about some of our, just like, yeah, it's a missions conference, but it's basically a little concert we're getting. If you know they like music, say, do you want to come hear some music for free? All they have to do is say no, it hurts you or anything. So making the most of our opportunities. Share things on social media. If you're on social media and you know that you're connected to people that would never just drop by our church's website, share something that the church scripture, the pastor's very short video devotions. They're short, and but they're great little things. They're doctrinally sound. Um, they're they're very biblical, and it's just a good, quick way. And I don't know, but sometimes when I see a video, I look at how long was it? How long was that? I won't click on it till I know how. And his are so short. I think and the Lord may use that. We don't know, but we could just keep having the opportunity. So now, verse 6 is, the one that, us talkative folk, we get thrown in our face all the time. If you're a talkative gal, you've heard this scripture. You've also heard the one about women being quiet a bunch of times too, let me tell you. So the next one is, let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how ye ought to answer every man. See, I knew how to answer that person at that party. I knew how to answer, but I didn't because I was in the wrong place. I was not being wise with those who were without, and I was not redeeming my time. That's there was a okay. Anyway, so this one time, no, that wasn't that. She met. I don't know. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I'm just saying we got to be wise with how we're getting the gospel out, and our speech always needs to be with grace. That is probably something I've been burdened about. Maybe not my speech will be always with grace, but what I post on social media be always with grace. And so I've deleted a lot of. I will start one off and then I delete it. It just doesn't sound. I don't know if people can get the tone that maybe they're going to pick up, think it's a different tone than I'm meaning it. And what if it's someone I never will ever meet, but then they trace it back to my homepage and they see that I go to this church. Well, that church, there must be all jerks and things like that. So I try to be careful of your footprint on social media, um, especially sharing pages. If you be careful who you share. I mean, I've made the mistake sometimes myself, but be very careful, especially if their page title is gross. If it is not pleasing to the Lord, don't share that post, okay? Because it's so jarring. It's so jarring. We're like, la la la, I'm with my church body friends and I'm safe on their timelines. Oh my goodness, what is that? It's happened more than once. So be very careful with that because you represent Christ first and foremost, but you represent our church in this community, and people notice things. They pick up on things. They notice things, and so have grace and know that you don't always have. This is the hard part. You just have to let the world know you were the right. You were right. Okay. You just let it go. Let it go. Just let it go. Um, Defend the Lord, yes, but if it's going to start this huge thing now, seasoned with salt. Some people say that means like preserved with patience or whatever, because salt is a preservative and stuff like that. Um, and it does not mean the Bible's giving you permission to be salty either. Okay, so that's probably what my youngest would say. Salt. Think about salt. Salt is essential. We have to have it. Our bodies have to have it. I have an impaired sense of taste because of a brain injury in the 90s. and many foods. If I don't put salt on it, I can't taste it. So it brings out the flavor. It does preserve. And so my speech should be something that's giving someone a good flavor, I guess, and something maybe yeah, I don't want to leave a bad taste in someone's mouth, and I know I have before. Um, and make sure that I'm giving them words from God that are they're preserved. They're the word of God's going to live on and on and on and on. So now we get to the rest of the chapter, and so he's wrapping things up. It's like salutations, I guess we'd say, and they're personal now, and they have very difficult names to pronounce. So I'm sure I will butcher them. So um, verse 7 says, "All my state shall declare unto you, who is a beloved brother and a faithful minister and servant in the Lord, whom I have sent unto you for the same purpose, that he might know your estate and comfort your hearts." Now, what is estate here in this one? So it's like you're not estate like we mean it, like it just means your circumstances, your situations. How's it going? How's it hanging with it? Yeah. Your situation, a beloved brother who is one of you, they shall make known done here. Aristarchus, Aristarchus, I don't know, my fellow prisoner saluteth you, and Marcus, sister's son to Barnabas, touching whom you receive commandments. If he come unto you, receive him. These are just like little instructions he's giving, okay? And Jesus, now remember, Jesus was a very common name, okay? So this is not Jesus the Christ. And Jesus, which is called Justus, who are of the circumcision. So they were what? Jewish, okay? These only are my fellow workers unto the kingdom of God, which has been a comfort unto me. These people have helped me out during a rough time, this time of bondage. Um, Ep- E- Epaphras, or I'm not really sure, verse 12, who is one of you, a servant of Christ, saluteth you, always laboringly, fervently for you in prayers, that you may stand perfect and complete in the will of God. Not perfect like you never have anything wrong, but complete. Your faith is complete. 13, for I bear him record that he hath a great zeal for you and them that are in Laodicea and them in Hierapolis. Luke, the beloved physician, who wrote the book of Acts and Luke, and Demas greet you. Salute the brethren which are in Laodicea and Nymphas and the church which is in his house. And when this epistle is read among you, cause that it be read also in the church of the Laodiceans, and that ye likewise read the epistle from Laodicea. He's like, switch out your letters, pass it around, which is what they had to do. They had to pass it around, word of mouth. This is how they were being, and it's amazing that the gospel spread like it did. They did not have things just printed out for everybody to read, but that's how dedicated they were to the teachings. That's how blessed I think it was by God. Something's bothering my nose. I'm sorry. God put a protection over it. And in the no, I don't think it's going to be anything. Thanks. Um, in the play we have coming up in at Christmas, there's a line where this person who's not saved says, can you really use the Bible as a source? I mean, come on. It's old. It was written by dudes a long time ago. And how is that even a source? How is that accurate? But the fact that it was written by a bunch of dudes over a very long time period, but doesn't ever contradict itself, is proof of God's hand and protection over his word. If we started the rumor game where, I would whisper something to Amanda and then she whispers and whispers and whispers. And by the time I got to Kelsey in the back, probably it's not going to be 100% exactly what I said to Amanda because we hear things, we interpret things differently from our life stories. Our perceptions are different. That's why opinions are so different. This is something I've explained to my kids in my classes. Um, we all come from different stories, so we see things differently. And so if God wasn't the one who actually wrote this, then we would have all these different opinions in there. People would have changed things and they didn't. Did they have a different style? Yes, we do see that, especially amongst the gospels. They had different styles of writing, but they didn't conflict with each other. They didn't contradict each other. Okay. And I struggled with that for a while in years past because that's a common lie that Satan and the world wants you to know, to have in your ear. Well, how come in this book it's written like this, but over here in the book of Mark it's written like this? That shows you it must be different. It's wrong. It's not written by God. That's not it at all. It's different styles. They each had a different purpose besides the purpose of God inspiring them. They each had a different they had a different audience, different viewpoint, different everything. So, if you want the Reader's Digest version, go to Mark. If you want more descriptive, go to Luke. That kind of thing. But they don't conflict with each other. So he's saying share these with them, and but it's just amazing to me that he is so concerned about all these other people. I think he knew the old saying, he wasn't going to be long for this world. I don't know how much time was lapsed between when he wrote these epistles to his death. That's something we could search out. I'm sure you Bible Institute people. I think that should be y'all's job. Just joking. Anyway, so some of these people were they were with him on some of his journeys, and he's saying, I really knowing he knew he wasn't just tying things up for this letter. I think he knew he was tying things up for the world. Had starved her blood so much, her brain was not good, and she was really out of it, and she wouldn't have known who I was. I mean, so it was really good that we had that. And I think Paul's knowing. I don't have this proof, okay? I'm just feeling he's just making sure, like a good teacher does, that okay, I'm going to make sure that I'm not going to be here, but you're going to be here, so you read that to them and make sure you share that letter to them. And he's trying to encourage them, and I think he's happy as all gets like, yeah, I'm gonna go home. I don't know how old he was at the time. Does anybody know how old he was when he finally was murdered? I don't know. I've never really thought about that. But we do know first of all, he talked about his thorn in the side that he doesn't really define, and God doesn't define. And I think that was on purpose so that we wouldn't know what the thorn is and we can just identify it to whatever our thorn is, you know? So we know he had some kind of challenge. And plus, being in prison, that doesn't make you good. So even if he were still relatively young, being in those dank, wet, whatever prisons, I could see someone having really a lot of problems with arthritis, um, respiratory issues. So he would have been about in his 60s, and so he was usually pretty a fit person. Notice he talks in a lot of sports terms. Run the race, he does that a lot. So we usually portray him to be someone that was athletic. It's usually, and in his younger days, he was athletic and a hothead. Okay, that's how we usually portray him. But by in the 60s, he would be feeling it, especially magnified by the part of his circumstances. Mm-hmm.
for TV.
Mm-hmm. So about, about 62, 65, whatever. And he was beaten. Uh, he'd been stoned a couple times. Shipwrecked, bitten. So all of these things he was spared from, but that doesn't mean he didn't have some kind of effect on his body where he was uncomfortable. We don't know, but the thing is, his focus is so pointing out. I still want to have more opportunities to share with guys. So humbling to me because I just feel like he's here and I'm like here, and um, we can use it as a test of our measure. Of course, you don't compare yourself to another Christian. You can be inspired by their walk. That's great, but don't compare yourself to them. That's a trap that Satan loves for us to fall into, guys. You're not as good a Christian as she is, stuff like that. You use this to be your standard of measurement every time. Every time. It's real tempting to put your they look like they have. Remember, what something looks like is not always what it is. Somebody here might look like their life is all together, but back home maybe it's not. The thing is, that's not how you're going to be judged when you stand before the Lord. Okay, He's not going to say, well, compared to that other person over there, you did a great job. Jesus won't say that. So I've got to be. I think something that's been on my mind in the past year or so is I've always thought about being saved for sure. Okay. And I have to be honest with you, I used to really want to study um, end times too much because my point was, well, I won't be, so I didn't care. But it does affect how we live today. There are some things. And so over the years, I've been learning, and something that I'm really trying to get better at is thinking, because to me, it felt selfish to focus on the rewards. I remember when I was younger as a Christian, well, I shouldn't just focus on the rewards. I should want to do this because I love God. I need to obey Him because I love Him. And that's true. But it's okay to think about the rewards you will be getting. We're going to cast them down at Jesus' feet anyway. You know what I'm saying? All our thrones, crowns, we're going to be a woo. But I used to think that was just so selfish to think about that. But now after started reading, rereading about in the Continue book, it's very cut and dry. It's very easy if you're reading about the crowns. It's the later part of the book of Continue. He writes it clearly without talking down to you. And I was going over that because we went through that course a couple of times, and I thought, what, you've been missing some opportunities to do some things, and it kind of woke me up to I do need to focus somewhat on the rewards. Not because I want to get rewarded, but I want things that I'm doing to point people to Christ. I want, if whatever happens, I want it to point to Christ. And sometimes there's some things going on, and then we all have things that go on that we don't share with the whole church family, and you shouldn't. There's things you can just keep to yourself, especially if it's going to affect your marriage. Don't share. Oh my goodness, don't share. But sometimes you're going through something, and I'll tell the Lord, okay, I really don't want like this really bad thing to happen that is kind of looming on the horizon. But if it does, make me point everybody to you. Make my life be a testimony to you, no matter what horrible thing it is. And I say it to him, and mind you, Lord, I don't want that horrible thing. Okay, you got me there. Okay, I really don't want it, Lord. But just like Jesus in the garden, if it's your will that I go through that, I want it to, I want it to count. I want it to be, I want it to point someone to Christ, and that is something I've seen in other people's lives that does inspire me. That I want to be as faithful to the Lord as they were. And I don't compare myself to like I'm this trial. I want to do that. I want to be that faithful to the Lord. It's okay to kind of do that kind of comparing, but not um, oh, she's, every time I walk in her house, she's got home baked bread and and here I am with my box of crackers. Don't do that, okay? Because that's just Satan loving it. He loves to get us to compare. Um, so that is chapter 4, and that is the book of Colossians. Real quickly though, we do want to, like I said to the group before we turned on the stream, be in preparation. Start reading the book of Ruth on your own. The book of Ruth is not super long, so I don't think it will take us a long, long time. And some of it, I'm pretty sure. Let's just kind of take an informal survey here. Is everyone here pretty familiar already with the book of Ruth? Right. Okay. So we will probably spend some more time delving in, and there's a lot of symbolism. There's a lot of cultural things that we're not. First of all, first and foremost, we're not an agricultural society like we used to be in America. And that whole story is, agriculture, culture kind of stuff coming across. So we might have lost touch with our roots. Like I know I have, um, and so we'll just touch base on that. I'm excited about it. There's lots of good. I'll try to bring some examples. There's some different Bible study books on the Book of Ruth. Some are more in depth than others. Some are kind of fluff, but there's nothing wrong with fluff if you are also getting just to read something just nice and sweet. And